This lecture is on the endocrine system, and this is the introduction to the endocrine system. So by way of introduction, then, physiological systems, then, are never at rest. So homeostasis, then, is maintained through continual readjustments to changing conditions. And I will even say both inside and outside the body. So a quick recap then on homeostasis. This is a very important concept in physiology then. It is basically the condition of a stable internal environment in an organism. So this is what organisms strive for, what physiological systems strive for, is basically maintaining a constant, a stable internal environment. So that's what homeostasis is. And the problem here is that this requires continual readjustments because everything is always changing. Maybe you just ate, in which case maybe you have a lot of blood sugar entering your system. Your hormones are going to have to kick in to lower the blood sugar. Maybe you haven't eaten for 3 days, in which case your hormones are going to have to kick in to try and raid your liver for some glucose. This can go for temperature. Maybe you are running, and so your physiological systems are going to have to make you sweat, for instance. Reroute where your blood is circulating, and so on. So all of these different stresses, I wouldn't even call them stresses, but just the fact that by virtue of being alive, the environment, the external environment is always changing, and your internal environment is always changing. And that then means that your hormones have to tweak your system. Lots of other tweaks take place with many of your other physiological systems, but your hormones are part of what allows you to maintain homeostasis. And as I said, this is done by sort of continual readjustments, basically continual tweaks to keep that environment, that internal environment, stable. So the endocrine system then works in conjunction with the nervous system. So, for example, The nervous system not only controls your muscles, something that you're probably familiar with, but it also stimulates parts of the endocrine system. So, as an example, this is how I will tend to abbreviate example, just EX. So, for example, when you run from danger, the nervous system not only controls, that's an S there, not only controls your muscles, it also stimulates parts of the endocrine system. And the endocrine system then stimulates, this is still part of the example now, stimulates your heart rate and your respiration rate. Okay, what did I just say? What I just said is this. Okay, so suppose that you are subject to sudden danger. You see something that frightens you. Okay, so you start running away. Let's say for the moment that this was a conscious decision. You saw something frightening, you ran away. But you are also just plain frightened. You may have made the decision to run away, but at the same time, your endocrine system was busy pumping hormones like epinephrine, that is to say, adrenaline, into your system, which is going to change your heart rate and your respiration rate independently of the fact that you are running. So, for instance, if you are driving along and you narrowly avoid getting into a car accident, at that point, you're sitting in your car, you're not running, but your heart is pounding, and you may be breathing heavily, and that is because your endocrine system has dumped some epinephrine into your system, and that is having an effect. Your nervous system may be responding as well, but your nervous system, in part, told your endocrine system to pump out these hormones. Okay, so hormones, then, is what we are talking about here. Your endocrine system, I hope you recall, is what does your hormones. And hormones are produced by glands. So glands are organs that are made up of specialized epithelial cells. You know that already. When we studied the tissues in ANP1, I hope you remember that epithelium does two things. It does coverings and linings on the one hand, like your skin, like the lining of your digestive system, but it also forms glands. All of your glands are made up of epithelial tissue, and some of your glands are made up of epithelial tissue that are a part of your endocrine system, your hormonal system. You also have glands like sweat glands that are not a part of your endocrine system. But in any case, all glands are made up of specialized epithelial cells, and these basically secrete substances. That's what glands do. They secrete substances. So glands then are either exocrine glands. You should remember this. These are the ones with ducts. So these are things like your sweat glands, where the secretion flows into a tube to wherever it's going to go. Those are all exocrine glands. We're not talking about them right now. Then there are also endocrine glands. These are the so-called ductless glands. And your endocrine secretions then, your endocrine glands secretions are your hormones. So the endocrine system then is all about hormones. So hormones then, these do a lot of regulation. So they help regulate overall metabolism, they help with homeostasis, they also regulate growth, and they help to regulate our reproductive systems. So with most hormones, then, the area where they are released and the areas they affect so location of release of hormone, that is to say location of the gland, and the location of the tissues that are affected then. These are not necessarily close together. This is kind of the remarkable thing about hormones. Where the hormone is released and where the tissues are that get affected may be very far apart in terms of the body. So this is why hormones are sometimes referred to as chemical messengers. They take messages all over your body. Now, there is an exception to this, and I'm going to go into that briefly. So the exception to this is a group of hormones known as prostaglandins. So this is the exception. Prostaglandins are sometimes called local hormones. And they produce their effects without entering the bloodstream. So this is a little different. And prostaglandins influence many metabolic activities including heartbeat, blood pressure, the excretion of urine, and the contraction of the uterus at childbirth. That is famously a time when prostaglandins come into play. So prostaglandins are an interesting exception to the idea that hormones enter your bloodstream and may travel far from their place of release to wherever they affect. Prostaglandins act locally. But getting back to hormones. So more now on hormones. And usually there are low hormone concentrations in the blood. So what this is saying is that a little goes a long way. This is an important thing to understand, actually. Here, I'll move aside here. Hormonal concentrations in our blood are usually very low. That does not mean non-existent. It just means that they are powerful chemicals. So we do not have large concentrations of them in our blood. This is why hormonal treatments have to be done so carefully, because you do not want to have too large a concentration of a given hormone in your blood, because it can have all kinds of unexpected physiological effects. So, as I said, a little goes a long way when it comes to hormones. So, each type of hormone is recognized only by specific tissues. This is kind of the amazing thing about hormones. They travel all over your body, but only certain tissues recognize them. And the tissue that is regulated by a given hormone is called the target tissue. So the hormone may stimulate the target tissue and increase its activities, or it may inhibit the target tissue. And decrease its activities. And these are both done by changing the rates of certain biochemical reactions in the target tissue. So, a hormone may cause a reaction to start. So you may have a reaction start, or stop, or speed up, or slow down. And that's all they do. It's kind of remarkable in many ways, considering all the effects that hormones have. That's all they do. They reach a certain tissue, they reach certain cells, and they tell those cells to start something or stop something or speed it up or slow it down. It's something the cells are already capable of doing. They may already be doing it. All the hormone says is do a little more of that, or do a little less, or stop, or start. That's all that the hormones do, yet they have these remarkable and powerful and wide-ranging effects. And that is it for this lecture.